Let's start with the Eastern Conference Final. Hell is real. Columbus versus Cincinnati. What some are saying was the best game in conference final history. I'm going to throw it over to you. I want to know our prediction. We both predicted Columbus. One of us predicted Columbus 3-2. That was me, by the way. So, how did this game live up? Can you think of other games? I know we talked about it a little bit on the top 10 episode that went out on Monday. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. But does this game rank up there for you, one of the best in the world, or in the history of your time here?
It's definitely up there. It was a really good game. Lots of back and forth, late goals, all the good stuff. I mean, definitely doesn't scratch the surface of 2022 MLS Cup final, but certainly a really good game. One of the best and most memorable that we will have for probably a number of years for a playoff game. I mean, it's the cherry on top that it's a rivalry game. This would have been a great game regardless of that, but the fact that these two are big time rivals, I mean that adds so much more to it. But yeah, I mean, I would say it definitely is up there as one of the best conference finals games. I can't tell you off the top of my head where exactly it would rank. I would have to go back and look at other conference final games because I can't remember all of them. But it's definitely it was very memorable.
Yeah, 100%. Just a quick rundown for those of you who may not have seen the game. I don't know if you were under a rock or whatever, but FCC get off to a flyer of a start through Brandon Vasquez, a really great control on the box with pressure on his back, takes it out from under his feet, beats his defender, and finishes to the far post. A goal, in my opinion, that is worthy of somebody being mentioned in a U.S. men's national team breath. When I say that, I'm not saying like, oh my God, he's our starter. But when you're talking about who that person is who's going to come in for the January camp, for the Gold Cup rotations, for the Low Nation League games, right? Brandon Vasquez didn't score a lot of goals this year in his own right. Like his season was underwhelming. I'm going to put that in air quotes to his own standards. But the fact that he can pull off goals like that, where the ball is behind him, he's able to receive it with his weak foot, get it out to a point where he can set himself up for a shot and then finish it. That's a U.S. men's national team striker type of goal. Somebody who can create something out of nothing and get the finish. I was really, really impressed with that. Lucia Costa finishes just before extra time or the end of added time in just an insane sequence. And it puts him up 2-0 just before the break. And they kept defending. Columbus got back into the game. Two massive substitutions changed the game, in my opinion. They came in the 65th minute when Julian Gressel and Christian Ramirez entered the game for Columbus. Those two changed the game because everything came down Gressel's side and they created insane amount of chances. The 75th minute own goal came off a Julian Gressel cross. Diego Rossi's 86th minute leveler also came from that side. And then, of course, the Christian Ramirez from Cucho Hernandez started with a Julian Gressel service. Those two need to start the MLS Cup final, in my opinion. This game was just Coco Loco, man. I mean, what an absolute burner of a game. You mentioned that it was a rivalry game. It definitely sparked even more of a passion for that game in that area. I was just really, really blown away by it. But there were some very questionable decisions that I want to ask you about. One of them being the fact that both Alvaro Barreal and Luciano Acosta basically couldn't move by the end of the game, cramping up, unable to make runs in behind, unable to really do anything once they started moving at more than a walk. And Pat Noonan had an extra sub on his bench with this. I believe he got a sixth sub in the extra time period. He didn't use it. Instead, at the halftime whistle, he subbed on Sergio Santos and Marco Angulo for Brandon Vasquez and Jaime Moreno, leaving two players who couldn't move on the bench. What are your thoughts about that decision?
That whole sequence was it, I don't want to criticize Pat Noonan too much because he's had an amazing season and I think he set them up really well in this game. And I think he was a little bit hard done by his team having a mixture of suspensions and injuries and a fully healthy FCC team. This is a completely different game, but I got to knock him a little bit for that decision. Why even give the option to ask that question to Lucio Costa? Of course he's going to say he doesn't want to come out. He's the face of the team, star player, fighting to keep this team in the playoffs and get it to penalties where they could possibly move on to MLS Cup final. Of course he's not going to want to come off. Of course he's going to say, yeah, I can finish this out. I think as the coach, you have to look past that, realize that he is going to be a liability out there. I understand he's the face of the team. You don't want to like upset him. He's a good penalty taker, all of that, but it ended up hurting them because now they're playing basically down with 10 men, 9 if you even want to throw in Barrial as well. And it ultimately cost them because Ramirez got the goal in the 114th minute. Columbus were attacking and attacking. He needed to get fresher legs on there so that they could sit back and defend more. And I think he swapped out guys who had fresher legs, like Moreno and Vasquez, as compared to guys like Lucci and Barrial. So again, I don't want to like focus too much on knocking Pat Noonan because I think he's done an amazing job and he's a great, great coach. But I think that was a massive mistake, and I think it cost the team.
I completely agree. Like I said, I'm a coach right now. When you see stuff like that, it is such a difficult decision because you know they're your best player. You know they're going to make things happen. And especially when you might be down and you need a goal, taking off the MVP of the league and what is pretty clear cut. I think you can probably make an argument for one or two players, but what is pretty clear cut as the best attacking outside back in the league, taking one of or both of them off for other people who haven't produced is a difficult decision. But that's what you get paid to do, to recognize they can't go, they can't run. There was actually a video that showed it, kind of like highlighted Barreal couldn't run in the buildup to Columbus's third goal. He was out of the play and limping back because he couldn't move anymore. Those are the type of things that, again, at pro sports, it's all about the fine margin, right? You in youth sports and building up things, you can work on ideas, tactics, general phases of play. Once you get to the pro level, everybody can do. So it's about who makes the impacts in the biggest moments. And when your big impact players can't do that, you have to find other people who can. Those fine margins they lost, and that's why they lost this game in the comeback. In my opinion, of course, but what do I know?
There
Question.
was
Oh, go ahead.
there was no reason, in my opinion, to leave on attacking players in the hopes that you were going to score a goal because FCC was dead in the water when it came to attacking. They made the substitutions to try to see out the game. Uh, and they were defensive substitutions. It didn't end up working out. They weren't able to hold the lead, but they were able to take it to extra time. And in that first 15 minutes in the extra time, besides like the first minute or two when they had that really good opportunity to score, they showed no signs of life when it came to attacking. They were not going to score. There was really no point to them keeping out playmakers to try and score. I would imagine his goal was to keep them on for hopes of penalties, which I kind of get, but still, you got to get to penalties first. And I think he needed to bring on players that were going to get him to penalties. And then it's a crapshoot. Who knows what's going to happen? Anything can happen in penalties.
Yeah, and do you trust somebody who can't run to run up and take a penalty? Right?
Yeah,
Because that was
exactly.
the thing going through my head is like, oh, he's keeping him on if they can get the penalties. Well, that doesn't matter if he can't run up and kick a ball, right? That's uh
100%. Yep.
that's mental. So two massive or three massive moments in the build up to the comeback here. And we'll start with the one that put them down 2-0. In the build up to the Luciano Acosta free kick, I mentioned it was a mental series of plays. Luciano Acosta is standing over a free kick caused by what seemed to be a ghost foul. and I'll try and describe it best I can. I forget who the strike was. I think it might have been Bupensta. Or it might no, it was Vasquez. It was Vasquez. Vasquez is running in towards kind of the corner of the box where the free kick obviously is taken with, I believe it was Rudy Camacho behind him, Steven Moreira behind him. His legs clipped together, falls down. Steven Moreira is called for the foul and given a yellow card. From every angle I saw, it looked like there was no contact, and the legs just came together. Vasquez's legs just came together and clipped himself. Did you think that was a foul?
Yeah, so when it originally happened, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. It did not look like he was even close. It looked pretty evident that he just like fell, he tripped and he fell. I saw a bunch of replays. I do think there is an angle where you could see that Vasquez's foot lightly taps. I can't remember who was running after him again. I can't remember exactly.
Moreira.
Moreira. It lightly taps Moreira and then hits his other foot and makes him trip. I mean, I guess by the definition, the contact with Moreira, I think made him trip, but it was just, I mean, it was Kleenex soft. Like it was tissue soft. It was like the slightest bit of contact, and then his leg hit his own leg and made him trip. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I honestly I really don't know. I guess it depends on what the rule technically is there. I mean, is the rule that if there's any contact in that case that it would be a foul? Because I mean, it looked like there was definitely contact. It was just so marginally small, the amount of contact.
Yeah, contact's contact. In the laws of the game, if you are making enough contact to impede the process of a player, it's a foul. And because of the position in the on the play and the shape of the defense, it's also a yellow card. I can understand why it was given in real time. At live speed, where the referee was, he's behind Steven Moreira, right? So his angle, he doesn't actually see Vasquez. Moreira's cutting across. So if Vasquez is running this way, Moreira's kind of coming like this across him. So by the time he comes across, he's seeing him come across. The leg that he's passing is the one that trips up over the second one. In his reference and his what he infers is that there was contact and the foul is made. It's not a VAR play. It's not a penalty. There's no red card involved. I agree it's very soft, but I do understand where the call came from. But they are also the reason why this is such a big deal is like 4 minutes earlier, Diego Rossi's in the box and is taken down with what looks to be a pretty clear shove in the back, like way clearer than the amount of contact in the foul before that. So you've got players who are what seems to be very clearly being fouled inside the box with no call being given. And then 4 minutes later, ghost contacts, pretty much giving a 2-0 lead to FCC. Now, take nothing away from the goal. The goal is fantastic. Brilliant finish. Great job from Acosta. But that set the tone, I think, for the comeback. Kind of you know what? We're not getting the calls. They're getting all the calls. Let's just go make our own magic. So I understand why it was given. It's a great finish. It's tough, but it's not something where originally, I agree with you. I was like, wow, that's bad. However, upon review and thinking about things like this, from the referee's point of view, I think with the information that he had and the information that the AR had, and all the things that come into it, I think he made the right decision based off of what he had, whether it's the right decision on the field. Does that make sense? Because you can, I think, as a referee, make the wrong decision, but it still be the right decision in the moment. I hope that makes sense.
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, that's all on the angle, right? Like you can only see what's right in front of you. Hence why we have VAR to give you more angles and give you more perspective that you can't see because you are only one person. I'm trying to rewatch the clip too and just see if I can find the point where Oh man, that honestly, that was really tough to see any contact with Morera. I don't knock. I mean, I know there's lots of people that are knocking and definitely were knocking the referee for that call when it happened, but it's probably tough to see from his perspective where he was placed on the field. And I don't think it was a situation where it was like, oh, he was placed in the wrong spot on the field. Like, where else did you expect him to be standing, like off the field, like behind the goal to see the right angle of that? Like, of course not. So it's a tough call. In the end, it didn't hurt Columbus, so really no harm, no foul. But people will still complain about it, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, there was harm and there was a foul and it ended up being a goal, but
Well,
we
maybe
moved.
there was no harm, but there was a foul.
Well, there was definitely harm. May not have been a foul. I think that's what you're. We flash forward then. The score goes in halftime 2-0, and Columbus have lots of work to do, and they get off on the wrong foot. In the 51st minute, Acosta picks up the ball after pressing the back line here. They win the knockdown. Acosta picks it up into space and slips Bupenda through. He cuts back, and what might be the save of the year from Patrick Schulte. I cannot believe this. As a former goalkeeper myself, this was unbelievable. This was all right, it's a 1v1. He's 12 yards out. I'm on my 6 yard line. I'm guessing, and he better put it that way. Because if he puts it the other way, it's a goal. If he just stands there and hopes to make himself bigger, it's a goal. He commits to one side like a penalty, and he tips the ball wide in what has to be the save, easily the save of the playoffs, but what could be save of the. How much of an impact do you think that makes on Columbus when they see that saying, all right, we're in this?
I hold on. I'm rewatching the clip because I feel like I'm about to say something pretty controversial, but I want to be certain when I
If
say
you,
it.
oh my goodness, don't make me. Let me give you the benefit of the doubt here.
Let me see one more. Hold on. I all right, I'm gonna say the controversial thing. I think this could be on the level of the Stefan Fry save in the MLS Cup final.
Man, I'm telling you, I was hovering over the mute button here for a second, think you were going to say something like, "Oh man, that was just a lucky save. It wasn't really that good," and you've redeemed yourself. Well, please continue.
Like forget the fact that like the game would go to 3-0 and definitely be done. I mean, morale for Columbus would be in the mud if he did not save that ball. I like that single-handedly, I think, turned the entire game around. And it wasn't like, okay, like that was a great save. Like that was an insane save. Like I feel like the ball was behind him when he was saving that. Like it was ridiculous. He had no business saving that ball. No business. If this was MLS Cup final, I seriously think I'd make the argument that that might have been a even more massive save than Fry. But because Fry did it in the final, I find it hard to say that with certainty. But that save, I like words cannot describe how massive that save was for Columbus.
You have easily redeemed yourself there, sir, because that's the correct answer. When you are a player and you're seeing the ball get cut back one on one with your goalkeeper, thinking, "This is it,
Yep.
season's over,"
Yeah, oh, yeah,
and your
season over.
yeah, and your goalkeeper comes up with that, instantly you've got a spark. Like, "Oh man, we're in this. We can do this." And his reaction, right? He jumps up and he's digging into his team. You can't let that happen. You can't let that happen. They're right, and they're thinking that's our life. That should have been our season, and we still have a chance. So let's pick it up and take it to another level. They had tons of chances. Celentano was great too, by the way. I'm not taking anything away from him, but that save is unreal. 69th minute. This one is less controversial here as um, Aaron Bupenda picks up the ball after a not so great rebound by Schulte, in all fairness. But he makes a great second save, and the rebound comes off his hand, and he tries to swipe it into the goal. And for whatever reason, the referees didn't immediately disallow it, which I think is crazy because, I mean, I texted you as soon as it went in, handball question mark. I mean, it comes off, and he just right into the goal. Um, Again, another one where they probably should have been down. They probably should have lost that game. Cincinnati had their chances, multiple chances to put this game away, and they couldn't do the job. And it follows suit with another trend that continues to happen in Cincinnati. And that is that they are the Atlanta Falcons of MLS. Blowing 2-0 leads in semifinals is what they do. They did it against Red Bull in the US Open Cup in 2017. They did it against Inter Miami in the US Open Cup this year. And now they do it again in Columbus. You mentioned something that I thought of immediately when I watched, saw that stat come up about experience, right? When we were talking about St. Louis and the experience that Cincinnati carries into this game is about as much experience as I have being a pro soccer. Going from 3 wooden spoons immediately into the conference semifinals is a massive change. And yeah, I know they made the playoffs last year too, but that big switch, it's a different game. You're playing your rivals in the biggest game of your short MLS history. There are just different levels to that sort of environment. And really, if you look at that team, there weren't a lot of players there who have been in that position. Don Badji came off the bench. I guess you could call him kind of the most experienced guy, but right, you're looking at Bupenza's first year in MLS. Vasquez was a bench player for the most part. Arias's first year in MLS. Acosta's done it before, but he couldn't move. Moreno did it with, I mean, he never made the playoffs with DC because DC were garbage. Barrial's first time in the playoffs. Mosquera's first year in MLS. Murphy's first year in MLS. Alvis Powell, maybe. And Celentano's first real run. And then on the bench, you're looking at it, and Sergio Santos and Badja are really your and Ray Gaddis, right? Are your biggest experienced guys. You don't have a ton of guys who have been there, done that. Let's get through this. Granted, neither have really Columbus, but the two players that made the difference, Christian Ramirez, Julian Gressel, both have been there, done that, know how to dig in, get deep. Diego Rossi's got an MLS Cup on his roster. Darlington Nagbe. I mean, who are we betting against? Definitely not Darlington Nagbe in that situation. That dude knows how to get things done. Rudy Camacho, same deal, right? That experience, I think, hurt them a lot. I don't know if you agree with me or not there.
Well, not to mention, I know you talked about, they were in the playoffs last year. I think it's completely different playoff situations for them. Last year, they're coming off 3 wooden spoons. The team's finally playing well, finally made the playoffs. I think everybody was just happy that they got to that point. There really wasn't a lot of pressure to get things done. It was just, this is great. We're here. We're not really expecting this team to go and win the cup. Whatever we can get accomplished in the playoffs is great. But now you're coming off a year of success. You've won up to that by winning the supporter shield. There's expectations now in this playoffs. This isn't just we made the playoffs, whatever we get can accomplish is great. You're the 1 seed. You were the best team in the regular season. There's expectations that you're going to at least get to the final. And so I think the pressure on them was probably even more so than just a lack of like experience from being this far into the playoffs. But I do agree with you. I think in terms of playoff experience, there's a number of MLS Cup winners on the Columbus side. Like, as you mentioned, Nagby's won with 3 different teams. He's won MLS Cup. Julian Gressel's won MLS Cup. Like, there's tons of guys on that side that have been in the playoffs, been deep in the playoffs, been in pressure games, and I don't think there's nearly as much on the FCC side. So probably a bit of inexperience and a bit of new pressure on them that maybe took a toll.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I mean, there's not much else to say there. Is at the end of the day, they'll be back. Will they be stronger? Don't quite know. You're looking at a team that I don't quite know what their situation is right now in terms of players coming back, but it's difficult to go and repeat that level of success in that short of a time, right? The turnaround they made was great. They might regress to the norm next year. They may be just sneaking into the playoffs next year. Depending on what sort of pieces they bring in and how they do it. This could be an Austin situation where Austin overperforms and then all of a sudden, oh man, they're mid again. Don't think that's going to happen, but you don't know, right? So definitely one to keep an eye on, and an insane game, one for the record or history books for sure.
Yeah, I think I want to add one more thing, and then I do want to ask you a question as well, just to before we wrap up talking about this game. I know we've been on it for a while, but I feel like FCC came out with the perfect game plan against Columbus, and it showed in the first half. They were not necessarily looking like the better team on paper because Columbus had a lot of the ball. They were getting into FCC's attacking area, into FCC's box a lot, and they were looking like they were having more of the chances. But I think FCC, that's exactly what FCC was expecting. They were going to play a bit deeper, take the pressure, and then counter. And let me tell you, Lupenza Vasquez and Lucia Costa were lethal on the counter in that first half. Every time those three were on the ball, they were creating fantastic chances for them to go and score. And they scored a few of them, hence why they had the nice lead at the half, and even still had a little bit of that at the start of the second half. But I just feel like they eventually ran out of steam, and Columbus was able to fight back. I think they had strong substitutions that changed the game, like you said, with Gressel and Christian Ramirez, and I think maybe FCC with, I don't want to say fresher legs, but had they just kept their momentum or their energy from the first half a little bit longer, they might have been able to hang on. But my question for you is, if FCC has Miazga, Hagland, and Nwobodo not suspended and healthy playing in this game, and we can make the same argument for Columbus. I don't know if they were missing anybody. Do you think FCC wins this game?
Yeah, yeah, I do because of the. I'm not going to use the term inexperience, but when you look at the starting lineup, Alvis Powell had slid in. Where are you starting lineup? Alvis Powell has slid in as a right center back, which is usually Mosquera's spot. He had that own goal to start this whole comeback off. I don't think Matt Miazga makes that mistake. Kubo did fine, right? But I think having Nwobodo, who covers so much ground, wins so many balls back, I think that's a massive difference maker as well. Nick Hagland, not so much. Nick Hagland was uh, New York Red Bulls' point of pressure during our away game that started our run into the playoffs. Not very good on the ball. He's okay as a defender. I don't think his absence. I think Murphy and Hagland are interchangeable personally, as I watched them both play in person. Um, but missing Miazga, who was defender of the year, maybe not like unanimously and like completely deservingly. I think there are other players who had a shout for it. And Nwobodo, who has been one of the better sixes in this league for a long time, which is allows people to do more things. Having both of those guys out is a massive, massive miss. Do I think they win the game? Yeah, I do. Because I think if FCC goes up 2-0, I don't think they let that much slip in comparison to what this group did. Because as we mentioned, when you look at the bench, now that you had Nwobodo come off the bench, right? But there are no center backs on that bench to come in. You had a couple of D mids. One of them was Marco Angulo, who's a U22 signing. Malik Pinto's your 18-year-old, I think 18, uh, homegrown player. Gerardo Valenzuela, who I don't think I've ever heard of in my life. Yeah, 19-year-old homegrown. He's an attacking midfielder. Then you've got Ray Gaddis, who did come on the field, and then 23-year-old Brett Halsey, who is from RSL and played at FCC2. You're not looking at a lockdown guy like, for example, LAFC had Aaron Long sitting on the bench if they needed to bring him in. They had Giorgio Chiellini starting the game, right? Like they had the depth to go ahead and say, oh, yeah, we can lock this down if we want to. They
Yeah,
just
just
didn't.
just look at Columbus. They
Look at
had
Columbus.
Shaburko off the bench.
Yeah.
That's a great player to bring off the bench to try to see it out when
Yeah.
Camacho got hurt.
Well, and that's the thing. They put so much money into this starting 11, and the starting 11 got the job done. But once you go an inch deeper and try and figure out what's going to happen when they're not there, that's the problem you have. They'll learn from it. They'll build their team a little bit deeper. Those guys, those homegrowns will come in and get another year under their belt. They'll be okay. But to repeat this level of success, I don't know if it'll happen again.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think they definitely got burned by the lack of depth there. I mean, if you compare them to looking at this Columbus team, I mean, this Columbus team is deep. I know we talked about that was it a couple years ago at this point, or maybe even start of last year or something. But this Columbus team is deep, and I think it's starting to show the fruits of that labor because that depth, I think, definitely won them the game against Cincy.
Can you imagine this group with Zeller on too?
Oh my God,
That's
they
for
would
another. That's for another day, though.
that would rival the LAFC team from last season.